Today, we've got 20 exclusive Tesla stories for you featuring bad drivers, young drivers, old drivers, angry women, and very angry cops. Roll 'em! Kenneth was driving his Model 3 in Santa Clarita, California when he was passed by two racing BMWs being driven by a father and his teenage son. The father, driving the Z4, collided with the rear of a stopped bus at about 65 miles per hour. The son, driving the 3 Series, was able to stop and avoid a collision. Responding deputies assumed the teenager had been driving the wrecked car, but the Teslacam clearly shows him getting out of the 3 Series. The deputies were amazed and grateful for the video evidence. The Z4 was clearly totaled, and 2 other vehicles were also heavily damaged. Demir was merging onto I-70 from I-225 in Denver when traffic started to slow down. The driver of the semi behind him wasn't paying attention and nearly rear-ended him. The trucker locked up his brakes and swerved into another lane, almost colliding with another car. Demir noticed something very odd. The semi didn't have any DOT number on the doors or license plates on the front or rear. Later, when he reviewed his footage to find out what company the driver worked for, he couldn't find any identifying markings aside from the brand of the trailer. Remember our submitter, Not Alpha, who works at an agency that purchases totaled Teslas in the US and ships them to buyers in Eastern Europe? Well, today he has 2 more crazy stories to share with us. The first is from a Tesla Model 3 Performance with only 43 miles on the odometer. According to Not Alpha, some parents bought this new Model 3 Performance for their teenage son, and he decided to show his friend what it could do. They decided to test the car on a residential street, and after their first run, they managed to safely stop and park on the side of the road. A few minutes later, they tried the same route again, speeding up the hill and turning around before flooring the juice pedal. Brace for impact. Thankfully, neither the son nor his friend were seriously injured in the wreck. The most impressive thing about this video might be how well that concrete structure held up. It doesn't seem to have been damaged at all. The Tesla, on the other hand, was deemed a total loss, which is when Not Alpha's employer bought it and sent it over to Europe. The Model Y in the next story met the same fate. When traffic slowed down, the man driving this Tesla didn't, deciding instead to swerve into oncoming traffic before hitting a dump truck. The report didn't mention any injuries, which usually means the driver walked away from the collision. The Tesla was once again bought from the insurance company at auction and is now being shipped off to Europe. Loves was driving his 1-month-old Model X in New York City near the Williamsburg Bridge. He was approaching a yellow light about to turn red when he noticed and stopped for a pedestrian. No good deed goes unpunished. The woman proceeded to smash the window of his Falcon Wing door. She also smashed the windows of a vehicle in front of him and another one 2 cars behind him. Loves had his daughter with him and decided the best thing to do was get away. He figured that reasoning with the woman likely wouldn't be effective and his kid needed to get to bed anyway. Loves figured making a police report would be equally pointless, so he paid the $1,400 US repair bill out of his own pocket. Nick was driving his Model 3 in West Covina, California when he slowly pulled through an intersection before feeling an impact from the right. The driver of a Range Rover had run straight into him, hitting the Tesla's right quarter panel. All the airbags in Nick's Tesla deployed. Thankfully, neither he nor the other driver were injured. They both jumped out to assess the situation, and Nick told us he's completely baffled that she didn't see him directly in front of her car. Police responded to the scene, but Nick wasn't able to show them his Teslacam footage since his Tesla had shut down after the collision. He retrieved it later, and he told us it was a lifesaver during the insurance process. After he sent this footage to the insurance company, there was no argument about what had happened, which he told us was the best part. The insurance company totaled the Tesla after discovering structural damage caused by the impact. Dawson was on his way home and driving through Sardine Canyon in the rain. When the temperature dropped, the rain started freezing into snow and ice. The driver ahead of Dawson took a turn too fast and lost control, hitting the divider before spinning into the middle of the road. He eventually regained control and was able to maneuver into the grass on the side of the road. Dawson pulled over immediately and jumped out to see if the driver was okay. It took him a while to get out of the car, so Dawson was worried he might have been injured. The driver eventually got out and assured Dawson he was okay. Thankfully, the car wasn't too badly damaged and the driver was able to continue. Mark was driving in Orange, California when he noticed a pool cleaning service truck dragging a large hose behind it. Mark followed the truck, and when it stopped at a red light, several people waved at the driver to get his attention, but it seemed like the driver was just waving back at them. Eventually, he got the message and reeled the hose back in, and it's a good thing he did. The hose could have easily injured a pedestrian. Joan was driving behind a cop car in Miami when another driver passed him in the bus stop lane and cut off the cop, and he didn't even use his turn signal. Joan sat and waited for the instant justice to get dealt out, but it never was. The cop didn't do anything about it. Joan just moved from California to Florida, and he's shocked at how bad Florida drivers are, but he told us he's starting to understand why. If the cops don't care, why would the drivers? Chasky was driving home when he approached traffic on an off-ramp. As he made his way forward, a tire suddenly flew past him before hitting the Honda in front of him, then hitting a curb and launching into the air. For a few seconds, all Chasky could think was, "Wow, that could have plowed right into me." Chasky pulled over to share his Teslacam video with the Honda driver, who'd walked back to talk to a dump truck driver who'd lost 2 wheels and hadn't even noticed. The dump truck had been traveling over 70 miles per hour when both of the rear passenger tires decided to part ways. Chasky invited the Honda driver to watch his footage. The other driver mentioned that he'd felt a bump and first thought he'd been rear-ended, but then he saw the tire and started to put the pieces together. The Honda driver was very grateful when Chasky offered him a copy of his footage to show his insurance provider. Veda was on his way home from an action movie and was driving in the carpool lane. He merged to the right when he noticed emergency vehicles approaching from behind. In addition to the flashing lights, he also spotted a dark shape which he deduced was a vehicle with no lights on. After the blacked-out vehicle passed him, he counted a dozen police cars from both the San Leandro and Fremont police departments in pursuit. When he took his exit a few minutes later, he passed what he thought was the same pursuit, but he wasn't sure if it was the same suspect vehicle he'd seen before. He fired up a police scanner app on his phone to see if he could figure out what was going on. It turned out there was a massive manhunt underway for a group of teenagers evading the police in multiple vehicles. When he got home, there were police officers at every corner of the neighborhood and helicopters overhead. Evidently, the pursuit had finally ended at a nearby school. We're just wondering if Veda experienced more action at the movie theater or on his drive home. Ren was headed home from work and was turning right onto a road when a Honda Civic driver overtaking another vehicle crashed head-on into his Tesla Model Y. Ren said this was more of a Honda slam than a Honda bump. He hasn't heard back from the insurance company, but thankfully, neither of them were hurt. As for the young Honda racer, driver, he was found responsible for causing the collision. Philip was driving his Model X following traffic in the HOV lane of a highway in San Diego, California, when he suddenly felt a large impact from behind. He checked his rearview mirror and saw that a white Mitsubishi had rear-ended him. It looked like the Mitsubishi was pulling over onto the shoulder, so Philip did as well. But then the Mitsubishi driver just took off. It's amazing that he was even able to drive the car with the hood blocking most of his view. Even so, he sped off down the highway, but Philip chased after him to make sure he had a clear shot of his license plate number before he backed off and called 911 to report the incident. When Philip got home, he inspected the damage, and he's still waiting to find out what the total repair bill will be. Shane was driving his Model 3 on a residential road in Auckland, New Zealand. He was obeying the speed limit while following traffic ahead of him. The driver of a Nissan began tailgating and wanted to overtake him, watching closely for a passing opportunity. Eventually, he crossed a double yellow line to pass Shane on the wrong side of the road and over a pedestrian crossing and over the crest of a blind hill. At the same time, another car turned across his path while an oncoming truck approached. He swerved left, forcing Shane to hit the brakes to avoid being sideswiped before zooming off down the road. Shane reported his reckless driving to the police, including this footage in the complaint. We hope the cops get a hold of the driver and give him a driving lesson. Richard and his wife Haley were on their way to trade in their 2020 Model 3 for a 2023 Model 3. They were only 1 mile away. They literally needed to make one more turn from picking up the new car when they were hit by a Honda CR-V. Honda bump. The responding officer loved Richard's Teslacam footage and said it made his job much easier. Predictably, he found the Honda driver was entirely responsible. They're now waiting to see if the car will be totaled or not, and picking up their new Model 3 is on hold in the meantime. We've seen people getting hit while leaving the dealership in their new Teslas, but this is the first time we've seen someone get hit on the way to the dealership to pick up their new Tesla. Of course, it had to be a Honda. Jacob was accelerating through a green light when his Tesla applied the brakes, and he had no idea why. A couple of seconds later, another car flew through the red light, nearly T-boning his Model 3. Thankfully, the car was smart enough to realize the other driver wasn't stopping and may have saved his life. Jacob kept heading home with his heart racing the whole way. He told us he's now much more cautious when going through intersections. Jet was driving home on a road with a 65-mile-per-hour speed limit. The truck in front of him was only going 40 miles per hour, so he decided to overtake it. Jet must love dashcams as much as we do because he also sent us the feeds from his aftermarket cameras for a total of 9 angles. Jet told us he thought the other driver was waiting for him and they only started turning after he began to pass. He had to go off-road across grass and onto another road, avoiding a collision by about 2 feet. Jet managed to escape unscathed, other than the hearing damage done by his mother's screaming. This emitter was on his way to pick up a friend from the airport. He was maintaining his lane when an SUV came speeding up on the left and crashed right into his Tesla. The SUV driver was found completely responsible, and our submitter is currently waiting for an adjuster to see if his car will be repaired or totaled. Dimitri was driving his Model 3 when he encountered a wrong-way driver headed straight for him. They both slowed to a complete stop before the other driver finally realized they'd made a mistake. Dimitri suspects this happened because of texting and driving. The next wrong-way driver is even crazier, so hold on. Gus was driving on the morning of September 16th, right after Mexico's Independence Day celebration, when he encountered someone who might have been celebrating a little too much. A wrong-way driver almost slammed into him before speeding off the wrong way in the bike lane. Gus stopped and checked for any damage and to make sure his family was okay. He reported the incident to the police, and since there wasn't any damage, they said they'd try to locate the driver and give him a warning. Still, Gus suspects this never happened. Remember when we did a comparison between a VIOFO dashcam and a Tesla's built-in cameras? Evidently, VIOFO was satisfied with the results of our tests because they reached out and offered to let us give away some of their dashcams to our viewers. Subscribe so you won't miss next week's episode when we'll be giving away some of VIOFO's awesome high-end cameras.